Welcome to Professor Game Podcast, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who brings the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I teach and work at IE Business School in Madrid, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Want to know more? Go to professorgame.com/subscribe, start on our email list, and ask me anything.
Hey, Engagers! Welcome back to this episode of the Professor Game Podcast. And we have a repeat guest with us today. Very special one, Roman Rackwitz. Roman, are you prepared to engage?
Always. Thanks for having me.
Welcome back, Roman. And if you want to learn more about Roman, you can go to episode 33. All right. Just click on that or go to professorgame.com, look for Roman, and you'll find this episode with Roman Rackwitz. It's episode 33. There you'll find his full bio. You will find his success, his failures, his methods, everything that you want to know about the typical episode that we have with our guests. But today we are here for a slightly or completely maybe even different reason. We are here because of the manifest. Roman, what is this manifest thing going on about growth gamification?
This manifest was, to be honest, there was a time when I had the desire to sit down and try to write down what's really interesting me or what drives me over the last few years in gamification. And I thought that there's something going on right now where I think I'm going slightly different or in another direction than most of the market, I think. And the point was that because all the other directions that gamification is famous for, let's say, for example, like the direction of serious games, or like the category of game-based learning, or reward programs, or whatever, are so dominant, I thought, okay, it's time for me to sit down and try to write down what I think about gamification. And then suddenly it became something like, what I called a manifest. And and the point is the website, right? So the Growth Gamification Manifest website is something that we created out of all the stuff that I wrote down, because of course no one wants to read 50 pages.
That is typical. That is normal. We both teach as well, and we know that students never like to read, let alone find something on the internet that is 50 pages long. So that makes a lot of sense. And Roman, would you say, I know that there's sort of many tendencies, so to speak, within gamification, and there's many ways of viewing it. There are some things that at least most of the experts, the practitioners, kind of agree upon that are not good practices. Things like, focusing just on points, badges, and leaderboards. I think there is, at least within the experts and the industry, there is mostly a generalized consensus in the fact that just points, badges, and leaderboards, for the sake of them, is something that doesn't work. But then there are other subtleties that I saw when reading your manifest, right? So what would you say, because you also mentioned this, you felt that you were going in sort of a different direction than many in the gamification world. So what do you exactly mean by that? Or could you give us sort of an overview of what are those points of difference? And maybe even, who knows, we can even discuss about it here.
Sure, thanks. So as you already said, I think, and this is just to mention it in the beginning and then we can set it aside, I think that still a huge percentage of our market is focused on these so-called loyalty programs or reward programs. Okay, and this is this extrinsically rewarding people for doing something. And you're totally right. Most people in the industry agree that that's not about gamification, or that even has nothing to do with the engagement in, or the motivation being involved in games. But still, it's something that seems to be very common to use in under the term of gamification.
Absolutely. And just to clarify here, when I say points, badges, and leaderboards, that's one form of extrinsic motivation, which is the one that most people agree upon, saying that doesn't work. However, there are some other extrinsic motivators, and we'll get into this, that are not points, badges, and leaderboards, and that have their supporters in to a certain extent, I might be one of them. All right. They have all I mean is extrinsic motivators do have their place. But I think you kind of make a point for, let's just forget about extrinsic and focus only on intrinsic. Is that right?
Yeah, it's right. But on the other side, you're totally right. You need extrinsic stuff also. And it's pretty easy to think about it, because the only way to be intrinsic motivated about something is if you're already experiencing the activity and realize that, you would also do the activity just for the sake of doing it and not for something else. Then you're intrinsic motivated. But in order to do so, you first have to get started to do the activity. And for that, you need an extrinsic trigger or motivator. Okay. But the point is that, and this is also what we are doing, we're using, especially in the beginning, we are always using extrinsic triggers or motivators, whatever. But, and that's often, I think the difference is that we now, or not we now, that's not true, because it's not the only right solution, but we believe that after we got the people being involved in something by being extrinsically triggered or motivated to do so, we need to design all the extrinsic stuff out of the system so that they are not overlaying the intrinsic motivators. And this is the other part, I don't believe in sustainable extrinsic motivation, because we get used to it. So if I get an extrinsic reward, it's amazing. But the next time I'm getting the same extrinsic reward, I already know it. I got used to it. So I want to experience more. And if I, as a gamification designer, build up a system that's relying on extrinsic motivators, the point is I always have to give you a little bit more the next time. And that means as the project lasts longer, or the gamification project, that means that I have to offer more and more and more, and you as a user get used to it more and more and more, and so it's a race to the bottom. And so that's about the extrinsic stuff.
Okay.
And yeah, exactly. So this is why we, for example, I have a principle built in most of our concepts, and this is what we call when we design the concept, we call it reframe rewards as resources. So whenever we have a reward or we think about it, we reframe it and say, okay, don't take it as a reward, but what would it be if we change it into a resource? Because if you provide a resource, if you give someone a reward, it's for what he already did. So he's looking back by saying, I did that and this is why I got the reward. But if you give him a resource, automatically he thinks, okay, what can I do next with that kind of resource? And so you're changing the perspective. And I think this already helps.
Let me try to land this here. And I don't know if everybody is familiar, for example, with games like Age of Empires. Right now I'm playing one which could be kind of similar in a way, which is Clash of Clans on my mobile. If you haven't, it's for free. So this example could be something that kind of suits you. When you're talking about rewards, you were saying, for example, instead of giving you the reward of, points in Age of Empires, which you also kind of get, you're saying, well, what I'm giving you is a resource. So this is a resource like wood or iron or gold or elixir in the case of Clash of Clans, so that you can use it inside the game in that case, which in this case would be something inside your gamification project. Does this make sense for you, Roman? Is that what you're targeting?
Yeah, exactly. This is already the right element. And at the end, it's important, and this is what I love about gamification, it's behavior psychology. So the only thing that counts is what's the subjectively perceived value of something that the user is experiencing. And so you can give him points. The difference in games, compared to reward programs, for example, is that points in reward programs are communicated as the reason to do something. Points in games are communicated just as a feedback mechanism. And that's the difference. So, of course, if I provide a resource to you, but in a way where I say, hey, if you do this, then you will get the reward. And if that's the only reason, then a resource also becomes an extrinsic element. But if, for example, you do something and you finally overcome a challenge, and this is why you unlock a resource that immediately provides you with the logic that, now because of the rewards, there's the possibility for me to progress, to become even better, then you have the possibility to change it into an intrinsic one.
Interesting. And Roman, to land it even further, I know you've worked with many companies and had many projects. Is there, again, with the whatever, NDAs or whatever, taking care of that, is there a concrete example that you can land us upon so that we understand better how does this work in a gamification project?
Oh, yeah, there are different ones. So, for example, and this is the most famous, and I've already talked a lot about it because I really love it. And it's actually a loyalty program for a hotel. Okay. But the difference is that the hotel itself, it's a small hotel. So it's very difficult for the hotel to compete with its reward program and compete with others, also with the bigger chains, okay, hotel chains. And so because these bigger hotel chains can always offer more or faster or more exciting stuff. So what the hotel did is, the hotel is a middle-age themed hotel. And the hotel itself said, it created a loyalty program where it said, okay, it's not about gold, silver, or bronze or other status, but it's about a king. So you can become a king. But and you still have to spend, and the point is, in the beginning, the basic is still the same. So you have to spend nights, you have to pay for spending the nights. And then if you have spent enough nights or you paid enough, then you will get enough points, and this will provide you to the status of the king, and then you level up. But, and that's the difference, instead of saying, okay, now, and this is what everyone else does, right? So it's just you spend enough money, now you reach the next level. That's this classic standard. What they did is they said, okay, now because you are a king, now you have to prove that you're worth to be a king. And the way how you can do that, and they did it with a nice description in a letter, and it was very authentic because the owner of the hotel are very well known for doing good, social events and whatever, spending a lot of money or collecting toys for children hospitals and so on. And so what they did is they said, okay, now because you are a king, now you have to prove that you're worth to do it. So what the members did is they for themselves, they thought about it as a resource. Now they have the role, okay? It became a resource because of the story. And so they said, okay, they proved, for example, with letters or with photos, with videos, or with a bank account, how do you say that? Copy of your bank account, that they spent money, or that they worked at open tables, or that they collected toys by themselves and sent it to children hospitals and so on. So the point is, they use that kind of unlocking being a king as an excuse now to put more effort into something like being good, doing something good for others. And this is what they always wanted to do. But now finally they found the time because the hotel gave them the role to do so and the task. And so the interesting thing here is that so if you would go to someone and say, hey, we have a way to improve your reward program. Do you know what? We make it more difficult for your customers to progress, to level up. Everyone would have said, are you kidding me? And what the hotel proved is that intrinsic motivation, or what we really like about an activity like games, sports, and hobbies, is not that it becomes easier, but it is that we finally have an opportunity to become better in something. And resources are most often just also something like a trigger or an earned way to be able to challenge yourself even harder. And we all know that if we get a reward, but it's not on a silver plate, but we had to work hard for it, we value that much higher. And so it's less about, okay, what's the next reward, what I can get, and we get used to it. It's not about that anymore, but now it's about, okay, I just proved that I can be a king, so what's the next challenge? Let me know.
Interesting. That's very interesting. And I'm sure that many people were saying that. But here's a difficult question, Roman. Of course, I find that super exciting, especially I like the mission of, becoming a king. And that means you can do things for other people as well, which is, absolutely amazing. I mean, there's no other word for it. The only question is, of course, if you don't, what if somebody says, look, you know what, I don't care, I'm not going to do anything. Do they lose a status? And if so, do you think that the hotel sort of lost potential interesting people? Like, how is that balance there? Like, yeah, we ask you to make more effort. Of course, some people are going to say, I'm not going to make more effort. How's that relationship, and how do they justify themselves internally?
So first of all, that means that you have unlocked, you still have, so if you don't do it, you're still the king, but you haven't unlocked the power, the rights of a king. Okay. And the point is that, and this was something that I was really fascinated working with that hotel, is that the director himself, he was totally aware of that kind of risk. But he said by himself, so we have two problems with reward programs. The first thing is that if it works, it only works because I'm bribing someone. So that means, so the question is, do I want to have these kind of customers in the long term? Okay. And then he said, no, I don't. It doesn't help me. And we know, and this is something that I'm really fascinated about, the whole industry of reward programs knows by science that rewarding doesn't change your buying behavior. Okay. And so we could go totally deep into now the whole logic or reason why we're still using reward programs or not. But this is the first thing. And another thing is that he said that even if it works, so even if I have a reward program that keeps people here, the problem is they get used to it. So the point is, if I'm creating a successful, classic, extrinsic, motivated reward program, at the end, I have to pay for it with my margin. And so this is also not the right thing. So he said he would, in the long term, in the short term, he lost customers with that. Okay. In the long term, he earned these kind of customers who were eager to stay with his hotel because of the community of people that he created around his reward program, his loyalty program. And by doing good, all the people having that kind of status, they know that, the others are also doing the good stuff, also social motivated. And what he really achieved, and this is what's the best stuff of all, he totally changed the game. Before, it was a playing field of a classic reward program where only that kind of hotel wins, that is offering the best product, so the best reward, and he's paying for that. He changed it into a playing field where suddenly the people are looking for tasks and challenges, and the customers put all the effort into it. And what's really fascinating is that if you have put time and effort with this hotel into becoming a king and putting your 2 days into because in the program because you worked at an open table or whatever, an orphaned home or whatever you did, the point is, just because another hotel now offered you the possibility to say, okay, if you come to us, you're not a gold member anymore, but if you progress in our loyalty program, you become the king of the surfer, whatever, I don't know, whatever the theme of the hotel is. The point is that the person who did it with our customers hotel, they know that, okay, if I change to the other hotel, everything I did before to become a knight is gone. So I had to start from the beginning again. This is the reason why people are still playing World of Warcraft, even if World of Warcraft is not the best game anymore. But they put 10 years of time and effort into developing the avatar. They are proud of it. It shows some kind of, looking at the avatar proves them the whole effort they put into it, the whole journey by just looking at the avatar, and you don't want to lose that.
That makes a lot of sense. I completely agree. And I love the fact, especially you were saying at the start, it's not the huge, massive, biggest hotel chain. Because if you're that one, maybe what you want to do is get as many people as you can because you need to fill so many rooms. Maybe if you're in the mid or even smaller range, maybe it does make more sense. You don't want just any customer. You probably don't have that many rooms to have everybody come in. And you are not, already necessarily the established brand. You're saying, look, I want my piece. I want my niche. And that's what I wanted to get to. You're actually targeting a specific group of people.
Exactly.
And you're targeting those people, and you're making those people your absolute fans, or that's at least what you're targeting. That's what you're going for.
Exactly.
So I really enjoyed that. I was just challenging to see what was the reasoning, and again, of course, it is, as I've said this several times in the interviews, it's like finding the perfect client, right? You don't always get the perfect client.
Exactly.
It's not always going to be that guy who says, "Oh yeah, I can lose some customers. That's fine." To gain that in the long term, having that long-term look can be very difficult for some companies.
Exactly. And this is, from my point of view, that's the challenge of our industry, because creating a game like, let's say, fascination or fascinating experience or whatever is always about time, because it's about a journey. You like a game, or you're fascinated about your hobby or whatever, because you know where you started from and where you are now. So we need that kind of time to create that journey, even if it would be possible to make it faster. But then we would losing that kind of emotional psychology hook that we are creating when we put time and effort into something and go on a journey together. And this is why, from my point of view, I only believe that gamification works sustainable if it's a long-term project. But most companies, even if they say in the beginning, yeah, of course, it's about customer value, it's about customer experience, and we are putting time into that, and it's a marathon and not a sprint. Even if they are saying that in the beginning, 90% of the companies trying to do that think that a marathon only lasts about 3 months.
Indeed. And again, I said this from the start, I like to bring in some of the controversy and be sort of the devil's advocate every now and then. There are places where that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, and this is something that I talk a lot about in conferences, especially in education. Many times you're designing for that, 4 or 5 year bachelor journey, and that is beautiful. You need to see how you manage to keep up the engagement and so on. But sometimes it's not just about that 5-year engagement. Sometimes it's about getting them through the next session.
Yeah, exactly.
The next 90 minutes. And there you have to see what you do. And it doesn't have to be all extrinsic either. But sometimes it makes sense to have something for the short term. So there are situations for each of them. The main thing here is, and what I'd like to take away from that is, many times when you say, we're in it for the long term, and they say 3 months, well, probably the long term is the company's sustainability. The company's sustainability is not the next 3 months, it's the next 10 years. When you're talking about organizations, the view of long term is really long term. You want to be there for the long run. You want to pay the next payroll, but you want to pay the one after that as well. And you want to continue to grow, and so on and so forth. So that view has to be there. That is fundamental, crucial, and super important. So thank you for that, Roman.
Just a quick break before we continue with this episode. If you've been enjoying this podcast, I would really appreciate if you share it with your friends and family and on social media. On Twitter and Instagram, it's @RobAlvarezB and the hashtag ProfessorGame, all one word. And in Facebook, you can find the Professor Game page. Thanks in advance for your engagement.
I'm taking a look at the webpage. There are you have the intention, the why, the what, the how. Then you have the 6 basic principles, and you have the guidelines. Again, we already talked about the general principles of, the whole idea behind intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic. We saw examples in a game that I gave, and I tried to do my best on that one for sure. Then we had a fantastic example in the hotel. We got a difficult question. If we want to go deeper, a little bit deeper, Roman, what would be next? If we want to, go deeper into this intrinsic motivation and this growth gamification, as you like to call it.
So the point here is, so we spent a lot of time now for the reward program example. But the point is, there's another difference that I see. And from my perspective and experience, and it's really only my personal experience, so it's very subjective. But the point is, I would say that 95% of gamification projects or people that I'm talking with are either way focused on reward programs, that what we have already talked about, or are focusing on game-like scenarios, like serious game, like game-based learning, like simulations, like marketing games. Okay? So the point is, these are all approaches where the user knows that now he's sitting down and playing a game. Okay? So most often, if companies are using gamification, at the end, there's something that looks like a game and feels like a game, obviously.
Okay.
And this is only one side of the coin, I would say. And the other side of the coin would be I take game mechanics and put them into their daily activities. So they are still doing their job. They're not sitting down and playing anything. They are doing their job like always, but now it feels suddenly perhaps more native, more intuitively, more whatever. But they would never say, oh, I played a game. They would just say, yeah, my job now feels just better. And that's the other side. Okay. And from my point of view, 95% is on the side where we're developing something where the user knows exactly that he's playing a game. And that's good for a lot of reasons. There are a lot of advantages for doing so. For example, if you want people to get out of their comfort zone, to try something totally creative, crazy, to be open for new stuff, whatever, it can totally make sense to say or to give them an opportunity to play something, because then they are in the mood, or their brain, their emotions, their psychology is in that kind of mood of, okay, now I'm in a safety. I'm playing a game is like a safety zone. Yeah. So what happens in a game stays in the game. Okay. Of course I can be crazy right now because
that's typically what happens as well when you do it in learning, right? You want people to test it out, to see what happens, to simulate this environment so that you can do, as you were saying, the crazy things, commit the mistakes, and be okay with it. Have a safe playground in a way. This happens pretty often in education, and this is pretty desirable often as well in education, right?
Yeah, the point is, probably you're right. But the question most often is, why are you doing that as a company? Why are you trying to use gamification or game design thinking or whatever? The point is, most often, you want to do it because at the end, these people should take whatever they learned in the game or whatever it was. I don't know. Whatever they experienced, you want them to use that kind of learnings in their reality, right?
Yeah.
So the problem is, just because you did something in a game, like scenario, and just even if you said, hey, it was perfect, that was the right thing to do, it was crazy, but it was right. Even if you have that kind of learning, it doesn't mean, and most often that's the case, it doesn't mean that when you shut off the game, and you go back to your desk, you don't think that, okay, it's still, most often you think, okay, now I'm back in reality. Here are rules different. Okay. So the mindset, the psychological, do you say that this way? I don't know.
Yeah.
That mindset is totally different. You switch over again to, okay, now back to reality, now back to my serious work. And suddenly what you have just learned inside the game doesn't count anymore. So the point is, so this is the disadvantage. So the advantage is, if you play a game, I can make you totally off and crazy thinking, whatever. The disadvantage is it's so difficult to transfer that kind of learning into reality because the user's thinking is a different one. Okay, it's about context.
No, for sure. There you're thinking more about changing the behavior or changing something that they're actually doing. And again, I'm just putting the counter example to make sure I'm understanding it right. Because, for example, one thing that we use a very nice simulation at the business school is to understand the concept about supply and demand. So they do something with trading in futures. It's called making money on oil.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It works pretty well. And the thing is, it sort of has that break point of, oh, now I understand how this works.
Yeah.
If you want to apply it later, it's sort of up to you. Then you can apply it in many other situations. But that initial point of how does this actually work and how can I experience it, experiment with it, it's sort of taking them out of the classroom, not grading them for this, not paying, increasing or lowering their pay for this. So it's sort of completely risk-free is an advantage to crack the code. Of course, once you crack the code and you get into the job and you want to utilize this, there might be a barrier, as you were saying, in how do you do it every day. If it's, for example, if it's organizational change, as we all probably know, it's not just about, knowing how good the change is and should be. It's about actually doing the change, right?
Yeah.
And that is hell. It's difficult. It's really difficult. So you want to do something like what Roman is saying, apply this in a way to guide the behavior towards them doing that in their everyday, right?
Exactly. The point is that I always say, if content is king, context is God. Okay? So the point is, it doesn't matter what you learn, and that's the content stuff. As long as the context, so your actual work environment, is telling you something different, you forget about what you just learned and you behave what's better for you in the context, in the actual context of your work environment. Okay?
Of course.
So these kind of simulations in school, in college and university are amazing to explain theories and then to let them experience it. The problem is, at the end, they don't care, and I really believe that. And I'm also teaching at the business school. But they don't care what they learned in school compared to what they try to observe and adapt if they go into the office of their new employer. The first thing they do is, okay, how are things going here? What are the rules in that kind of environment?
Oh, for sure.
And they will behave like that. So the question is, for me.
And it still happens. You have a gamification project. Everybody's supposed to be fully in, but then the culture of the company goes in the exact opposite direction.
Exactly.
And maybe their managers are not all in. So you do this whole thing and it falls down, not because the project didn't work, but because the company didn't really want to do that.
Exactly.
They were just doing this to fulfill or there was this guy who was very convinced, or this girl who was very convinced, got the project through, but the rest of the people or even leadership was not really convinced, so the company didn't shift, right?
Exactly. So the point, what I'm really fascinated about is, instead of trying to build something that is a game, or let's say like a serious game, a game-based learning, whatever, as I said, there are perfect situations where that's the right tool to do. But I'm much more interested in to find out, why are they not behaving the way that they should behave, or everyone wants them to behave in the actual working environment? So what can I change there? And then can I change it with something like game mechanics or whatever to introduce the game behavior psychology into the actual working environment? Because I believe that we are homo ludens. Okay? So I think that, and this is where the growth gamification comes from actually. I believe that the only reason why all over the world people are voluntarily doing activities like playing games, no matter if it's video games, board games, whatever, doing sports, doing music, and performing a hobby, whatever. The only reason why we are all doing that voluntarily is because these kind of activities are built much more natively for us homo ludens. Yeah, it's the perfect, these are the best situations in the world that we can experience that are matching our, let's say, natural behavior best. Okay? And the point is, if I want to have employees or customers, whatever, that are experiencing with my company, or that have an experience in the most natural way, the thing is, of course, I would try to look at these kind of activities like games, sports, and hobbies, and try to find out why are these kind of situations, context, much more engaging, and then how can I redesign my actual real processes so that at the end I don't even need something like serious games or game-based learning or whatever, because I have already introduced it a little bit, of course, a little bit in my actual real life processes, whatever. Okay.
Absolutely. It's like business transformation through gamification, basically.
Exactly. And because the people don't realize that they are playing a game, because for their subjective experience, they are still doing their job. You don't have this kind of break in, okay, now I'm playing a game. Oh, now I'm back in my serious work. There is no difference anymore. And this is what I really love to do. The problem here is that I actually try to avoid design stuff that looks like games. And of course, you can imagine that if people are coming to me and say, hey, we want to have a gamification project, they're expecting something that looks like a game. And so from my point of view, that's the difficulty, that's the challenge that I'm really facing most often. And of course, sometimes we are also doing serious games or other stuff. but my favorite approach is the other one. And it's really difficult to go with this. And the point is, and this is something, this is one of my one of my hardest learning, is that it's not the case that that companies are much more asking for serious games or gamers, so actually asking for something that looks like a game. It's not the case because they believe that that's the best solution, especially not, of course, if I have the possibility to talk with them over a period of time and try to convince them. The problem is that you have to think, you look at it at the point of view of or from the point of view of a project leader, for example. So he get a budget, and he has to be for gamification, and he has to develop something, and he has, let's say, 3 months. So the point is, he knows exactly that, okay, in 3 months, I have to go back to my boss, I have to show him something, and I have to get a wow. That's the only way I can get another budget, or that I can be promoted or whatever. So the point is, they are looking to design something where they can say, hey, boss, come here, sit down, take this, I don't know, virtual reality, or sit down for the game and play it. We have 10 minutes. And then the point is, they look at the screen and they see, wow, that looks amazing. That's our company. Hey, we are in a game, whatever. Oh, it's fascinating. Oh yeah, it's a game. Everyone loves games. Perfect. They don't care about they don't care about the disadvantages.
Makes sense. It's been a wild ride in this chat, Roman. I think those two principles that you were mentioning, they make a lot of sense as well. We were always giving it context. You were saying context is God. Well, the context is very, very important in every single project as well, where it makes sense, where maybe, they say, as you were looking, they're not really looking for that impact. They're looking for a wow, that is something that might be completely different, or it could come together every now and then. But sometimes it's just about that wow. So putting all those things together in context is very important. Yeah.
The point is, they are looking for the wow, not because they are stupid, but because it's the context that they have to work within. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's part of the pedagogy that we have to do, and not just in the classroom, but in the everyday communicating of the work we are capable of doing, and that gamification is capable of achieving as well. However, Roman, it's been a beautiful, by now, like 37, almost 40 minutes. However, we like to keep our interviews to a certain point.
Sure.
And I think we've given this a lot of juice. So before we kick off, where can we find more about this? Is there any place that you can guide us to so that we can find more information? Of course, where we can find Roman and his work, and before we kick off.
Sure. So everything about me, or you can find me on every social media platform, LinkedIn, YouTube, podcast, Facebook, of course, whatever. But most of the stuff is in German, I have to admit. Some videos on YouTube also in English. But what we just talked about is the Growth Gamification Manifest. And you can find that on the website growth-gamification.info. And this site is in German and in English, and so you can find everything there.
Sure, we will definitely put that as well in the show notes so that people can go there, find that juice, find that manifest right there. And thank you again very much, Roman, for having this chat. I think it was a subject that we could take out some juice from and certainly give some inspiration to the engagers. However, at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over. Engagers, it is fantastic to have you here. And I'd like to know, how are you listening to this podcast? If you're doing it on your mobile device using a podcasting app, I'd like to know if you have followed and rated this podcast. It is completely for free, so if you haven't, please go ahead and do so. That way we can reach more engagers like you to achieve our mission of making learning amazing using games and gamification. If you want instructions and you want to know a bit more of a know-how, all you have to do is go to professorgame.com/iTunes. And remember, please subscribe or follow using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.